It is an exciting time for Redmond's economic growth. REDI has remained resilient in its endeavors to help local businesses as well as new businesses looking to move to our area. So, what's the secret? Why are businesses able to thrive here? What attracts businesses to Redmond and Central Oregon in general? Based on a recent study of external business recruitment in Oregon, REDI Director Steve Curley and Business Oregon Regional Manager Michael Held are here to tell us about Redmond's business-friendly climate and unravel the mystery of business attraction in our region. Please help me welcome Steve and Michael right up here to the stage. So I'm going to get out of y'all's way real quick. I just have one question. How are things looking right now?
Very bright.
Put your mic up to your face. Oh, maybe?
Very bright. It's bright up here. How are things looking, Steve? You look good today.
Oh, thank you. You look good as well.
I know. I put on my fancy outfit for you.
Right. Thank you. So Michael and I have a little bit of history. We've worked together, I guess, over the years here in Central Oregon. And he's a Business Oregon guy who has some roots here in Lapine.
Roots through in-laws. They have a cabin that I like to squat in when they're not there. Things look beautiful down here, so I'm excited to hear a little bit about what you have to say today, and thank you all for having Business Oregon here. Why don't I just start with a quick intro about Business Oregon and this study that we did with some of your all's assistants.
Yeah, and maybe why you have less hair than Damon has.
Yeah, Damon's not here, so for those of you who are looking forward to our state economist joining, he got called into the principal's office yesterday at about noon, and that principal is Governor Kotek, so he can't really say no to the governor. There's a meeting happening at the Capitol around tariffs today, and you may see a little vignette in the local news at 6 tonight about that. So Damon sends his regards, but he's representing the state well within that conversation. So, and I do have a little less hair these days, but that aside. So I thought we would start with a little bit of just kind of macroeconomic factors and forces that we kind of pay attention to at Business Oregon at the state level. There are some headwinds, and I think we're all aware of what some of those may be. But it's sort of a mixed bag, and I think that's kind of the theme of my comments today is that, there's, depending how and what you're looking at, there's some good and some bad out there. So just a few notable points. When you look at job growth, we thankfully have a high labor participation rate, but our job growth, frankly, is anemic. And not frankly anemic, it's woefully anemic. So that's a real concern. We also know that our population is growing, but very slowly as well. And relative to other states, that's a concern because we know we need population growth to keep our economy sustained. And that puts us at a position where we really need to bring in-migration in to fill a lot of the vacancies that we may have. We have an aging population. The workforce is 55 and plus and growing. And so where are those workers going to come from is something we're paying attention to. And then, of course, we have some of the trade wars and headwinds there. The kind of seesawing back and forth. I think the most recent revenue forecast that the state put out did show some job losses in some manufacturing sectors, so we're paying attention to those, and particularly within a couple of Oregon's key industry sectors that are maybe more susceptible or vulnerable to kind of federal policy, being agriculture and outdoor gear and apparel industry and those sort of sectors. So those are some of the things we're paying attention to. Steve, I'm curious though how you may think about some of these headwinds at a more local, regional level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad I get to sit in this seat. This is sort of a good cop, bad cop here.
I am the state, so I can be the bad cop.
There you go. Yeah. So locally, when you look at job growth and what is happening, it's actually been much more vibrant here in Redmond and Central Oregon. The Milken Best Performing Small Cities report for Bend Redmond, which is the MSA, which actually now includes the Tri-County region, just jumped up to the number 4 best performing small city in America. So again, we're talking about the MSA. And you look at job growth over the last 5 years, 2018 to 2023, it was 10.5%. More recently, it's slowed down. It's around 3.8% between 22 and 23, with the short term around 1.4. So we are seeing a little bit of a slowing down there. And we know that the in-migration into Oregon, as Michael was talking about, is pretty slow. But here in Central Oregon, those numbers are a little bit better. Redmond itself is on pace to hit over 39,000 this year. So since 2020, that's a growth rate of about 16%, and an average annual growth rate over that time of 2.83%, which is much outpacing the state's growth numbers. So while this study that Michael and I are referring back to was a study that Business Oregon did over, what was the time frame on that, the last year?
Just published last month, and the bulk of the work was really last fall when we were talking to the business community. So yeah, pretty recent data that we're working from.
Yeah, and we had Eric Strobel from the EDCO team participating. He's back there at the table. You can wave, Eric. He was on the committee that helped put this study together. So EDCO did participate, and we did have companies that we had recommended for them to interview, and we'll get into that here in next.
Yeah, so the study that Steve's referring to, I'll just give the top line here today, but I encourage you all to go onto our website. You could Google the name of the study here, and you'll find it in our publications page. But this was a study that started with one frankly simple question that Oregon business and industry brought to us. And it's one that I think, REDI and EDCO and other economic development professionals, we hear a lot about, but we really didn't have good data to know the depth of the situation. And that situation is to what extent and degree are other states and entities recruiting Oregon businesses, right? We hear the anecdotes, we see some headlines from national news and otherwhere that Oregon companies are expanding in other states. So we really wanted to get down and quantify to what degree and extent this is happening. So when we got into that study, though, it kind of we turned that question a little bit on its head, because it's really less about what other states are doing to recruit our businesses, but what are we doing to retain and expand our Oregon businesses? So it really turned the conversation into one of, well, what are we doing? How are we doing retention and expansion work? And that became a big focus of the study, and where our efforts at the state are really turning to is how can we kind of mitigate some of the factors that other states are using to pull Oregon companies out of the state, but also how can we go on offense too? It's not just about being on defense. So I'll just give a couple quick highlights and takeaways. Not surprisingly, we did hear that Oregon companies are being approached. And I will say, though, I was a little surprised. So we interviewed almost 400 kind of executive level, CEO, high level management at traded sector manufacturing companies across Oregon. We also did 25 in-depth interviews with some of those CEOs, and then spoke with about 15 economic development organizations across the state as part of this study, EDCO and REDI representation being part of that. And of those 400 businesses we spoke to, 25% have been approached in the last 3 years by some sort of out-of-state entity to grow and expand in a different state. And to me, that's high. I would have guessed maybe 10, 15%. So when we saw 25%, right? 25% of 400. I'm not super math savvy, but that's a big number, right? And you multiply that over, times how many manufacturers are here in Oregon. That's a big number, and those are companies here in the Redmond area. So, Steve, I am interested in, as you guys think about, your all's, work here, kind of how do you guys approach this conversation of, other states or other entities kind of coming and talking to your businesses? How do you get involved in those conversations, and how do you then work with your businesses who maybe come to you with, hey, we were approached and now what do we do?
Yeah, and we have had companies here in Redmond that I have talked to that are expanding outside the region, and so I think the most important factor is to have a relationship with those companies and to be in conversation to understand what their challenges are and why they would want to make that decision. There are some good reasons to make that decision if they're growing and they need to reach other markets that are in other parts of the country, and they're going to create an outpost or warehousing or particular manufacturing somewhere where it's going to be closer to their customer, but yet they're going to continue to have their headquarters here and grow their business here. But we also see companies who have left the region, and there's a number of different reasons why. An example is Traeger pellet company a few years ago decided to leave the area. They're based more in Eugene, and they were shipping wood into the region, turning it into pellets and shipping it back. It wasn't very efficient for them. It wasn't very cost effective, so it didn't, for their bottom line, it didn't make sense to continue that here. They expanded volume closer to where their raw materials were. So there's a number of reasons why we try and stay ahead of that and be aware. And if there is something that we can do, and Business Oregon, as you know, Michael, has a number of incentives. The Strategic Reserve Fund that the governor has, when we need to deploy that to keep a company here, we definitely do that.
Yeah, and I think that mirrors too what we heard from the study too, is that by and large companies, they're looking at the bottom line. They're making decisions based on their own economic factors. Steve's example is a really good one. But it is something that we're paying attention to and watching. The other part of this study that we really wanted to dig into was just the business climate here in Oregon, and understand kind of the pressures companies are feeling, but also what's going well, what can we lean into and leverage here, because it's not all headwinds and doom and gloom. I will say the study was again a mixed bag. Depending on how you read and interpret things, you can kind of find what you want in it. And just a couple examples: 57% of those businesses surveyed said that Oregon was a great or good place to do business. Okay, that's good. But then flip side, 43% said it's a poor or fair place to do business. Well, that seems high. The other kind of notable fact is that of those surveyed, 52% have expanded in Oregon in the last 5 years. That's great. But around 34% have expanded in Oregon and elsewhere, which begs the question, well, what's going on there, right? And some of that's not a bad thing. Some of that could be just a company needs to grow and expand elsewhere, right? They need an East Coast distribution or location or be closer to different markets. So that's a good story. There's some acquisitions that happen, which isn't always a bad thing either, right? We love our companies to grow up, but sometimes that means they get acquired by out-of-state industry and they move locations. We see that too. Not necessarily a bad thing as long as you got new companies coming in the fold behind them. So again, kind of a mixed bag on what we heard from business and industry, but I will move to kind of an interesting and useful framework that the University of Oregon, who was our research partner on the project, offered to us to maybe continue the conversation here with Steve. Again, I'm filling in for Damon. These are his slides. This is Mrs. Weston, and he wanted everyone to see how upset she is at these push factors that are forcing companies to consider other locations. She is disgusted, and we need to make her not. So we're going to turn that frown upside down, aren't we, Steve?
We're working on that. Yes.
We are. So these are just some of the top things that we heard through the survey. This is not going to be a surprise. When you're visiting with companies, you're going to be hearing about these type of issues, regulatory issues, tax environment, availability of land, capital. I am curious, though, here at the more local, regional level, I mean, do any of these stand out? Would you add anything to this list? Or kind of how do you think about these push factors that companies may be feeling burdened by certain things more than others?
Yeah, and obviously state policy impacts us here locally, and I do hear that what the survey said, that the tax climate, the regulatory climate are definitely not positive when you talk to local businesses. But we have a lot of positive things here in Redmond. Redmond is very business friendly. From city leadership on down, they are very open to businesses expanding. When you get into some of the other challenges, it's not listed here, but homelessness and folks out without a place to live, they've been very proactive about creating a space to get those people back on their feet. They're working with the housing. There's a strong pipeline here in Redmond of housing that is quite a variety of housing, from multifamily to single family to duplexes, triplexes, et cetera. So they are trying to minimize, those push factors here locally. We still have the ones at the state level, but for Redmond, I think everybody is on the same page when it comes to trying to keep businesses here and not push them out.
Yeah, and when we wrap up our comments, I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we're going to be working on at the state level to address some of these things.
And Michael, we need to speed it up a little bit. They're going to turn our mics off.
They're going to turn our lights off. Well, sorry, this is Mrs. Weston, still disgruntled. Then there are those pull factors. So just real quick, these are the things that other states are kind of using to, as their leverage to bring companies into their own states. So it's not so dissimilar than the push factors. But the goal here is, again, to kind of mitigate some of these dynamics to where they're no longer kind of liabilities, but assets for us. And then lastly...
before you go, I just want to tell a quick little story there.
Sure.
When you look at pull factors, we're working with a company right now, which I can't give you any details on, but I can give you some high-level things that we're doing and the impacts that's having. So this is it's an earlier stage company. They have roots in the region, but it's grown to a point where they have had to look nationally. They've done a site selection process. And we've been working closely with Business Oregon, with the governor's office, and now with the legislature to create incentives to help get this company to locate here. It could be 1,800 jobs over 10 years, be a fantastic company for Redmond. But what we're finding is other states, East Coast states that are competing, are able to provide more incentives. They're able to provide land, buildings. We have tax incentives. We have some great incentives here, but we don't have the firepower that other states have. And so EDCO works every day to try and REDI to make the state aware, the legislators aware, that if we're going to be competitive and we're going to have family wage jobs with these traded sector companies, that we have to do a little bit more. So that's some of the behind the scenes work, the legislative work that we're doing to change that landscape a little bit and make Oregon a little more attractive and have better incentives to get companies to locate and stay here.
Yeah, and we definitely appreciate that local partnership to carry the voice into Salem to get some of these things across the finish line. And then there's those factors that anchor industry here to the region, to the state. Obviously, there's the fact that companies are owned and operated by Oregonians. We've got to keep those companies, right? That's if we're losing those, then we're really going to be fighting an uphill battle. There's this notion of second paycheck. This is, Oregon's a great place to live, right? And so that's an asset that we can continue to keep leveraging. And I know, Steve, you here at REDI do that. You think about that as an attraction for industry and workforce all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you look outside today when you were coming in, the mountains off to the west, the lifestyle that we have here. I was just hiking Pilot Butte last night with some trail life kids and at sunset and looking around at just the natural beauty and the assets that we have. That is a huge anchor that, and that's why people continue to come and the population continues to grow here in Central Oregon. So we have those things. We also have, here in Redmond, a vibrant downtown that is looking to add more family-friendly entertainment. Going to get an ice ribbon here in the near future, hopefully with the city council's support. We have a growing airport. We have a workforce in the region with a strong work ethic. That might be changing a little bit, but that historically for Redmond and the kids that have grown up here doing more outdoor stuff, they have a stronger work ethic. And you look not too far down the road to BASX, who's now over 1,000 employees, and they've been able to grow in the multiple hundreds over the last few years. And so they're figuring it out. They're making it work, and really grateful for them as one of our largest employers in the region. And so, and just to wrap up, all of you here in this room are anchors, right? You are the ones who have conversations every day with folks that are coming in and out of this community. And when you tell them your stories and why this is such a special place to you, they hear that and they want to be a part of that as well. And we need those people to continue to move here, to have the workforce and to support, the growing companies that we have. So,
yeah. And just quickly in closing, I'm not going to hit upon all these points, but we really are using this study along with our recently completed strategic plan to really make some movement in some critical areas. Steve mentioned a couple different policy areas. We have some items before the legislature this year around land readiness and business development that hopefully we'll get across the finish line. But I think kind of picking up on the thread that Steve was just talking about, so much of what we heard from these executives was that they need to hear from economic development. They need to see us showing up. They need to honestly just feel the love that they're valued and that they matter here in the state. And that came across more profoundly in this from all different locations and over and over and over again. And so we as a state know we need to be showing up more often to the business table, and that's an area that we look forward to making some inroads. And then lastly, I help manage the business incentive programs at Business Oregon, and we're taking a hard look at the existing programs. How are they working? Are they meeting the need, achieving the outcomes that we want them to achieve? Most of those have been created 30, 40 years ago. The world has changed. What do we need for the future? So that's going to be multi-biennium work, but we're actively getting into it and are excited about hopefully getting into some new initiatives that will help grow business here in Oregon. So Steve, I don't know if you have any closing remarks, but just to thank you for the time for Business Oregon to have a few minutes with you all today.
And thank you for filling in for Damon last minute, learning that you had to come to Central Oregon from the Dalles yesterday afternoon and making this work. Really appreciate it, Michael. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.